Hello everyone, Trisha, it's me Jenny, and it's time for another Not Naked video response to Trisha Hershberger's series Naked Truth, where we talk as candidly and as truthfully as possible about a subject of her choosing. Straight out the shower, no makeup, one take. If people choose to do naked, I choose not to. And I have to, in the acceptance of truth, admit that this is not my first take. I was halfway through my other take, and this not so little guy flew into my bedroom and terrified the bejeebus out of me. He's gorgeous, but not so gorgeous when he's slapping around your face halfway through filming a video. So, now that that's out of the way, I'm going to start filming my video again, and my tripod's a bit dodgy, sorry for the super cam. There we go. And today's subject is gender identity, particularly in regards to Caitlyn Jenner's outing, as it were, or her coming out into the world and talking to the world about what she's happening with her. And yeah, it's a huge subject. So first of all, I'm going to link to Hank Green's video on sexuality, gender identity and physical sex down below, and that's, you know, a video that I refer to a lot when discussing these subjects, because it's very well put description of those aspects. And then I want to talk about my opinion, because, you know, that's what these are about, more or less. And my opinion is everyone is on a scale. In terms of their gender identity, everyone is on a scale somewhere. You can identify very strongly male or very strongly female. Same with sexuality. You can be very straight or very, you know, bi-curious in the middle, or very gay. And that's equally absolutely fine. And in terms of modern medicine and modern physical sex, in terms of your physical sex and gender, it never used to be on the scale, apart from occasionally some outliers. But with modern medicine, there is another huge scale that's slowly becoming more and more prevalent. People who can physically change their sex is something that's becoming more and more available, and because of that, because gender identity has always been a flexible thing, people are now able to change their physical sex to accommodate for their gender, which is really exciting, and it's something that I'm actually really proud to be living in this generation, which is in a state of flux, because 20 years ago sexual identity, gender identity, sexuality was such a set in stone thing, and now it is such a flexible thing, and I see it progressing beautifully in the next 20-25 years into a whole new level of acceptance, and that is just something that's so exciting for my generation. But given that, you know, 2 generations ago there was no freedom for women. 2 generations ago, half a generation ago in fact, it's mostly illegal to be, you know, gay or anything like that. And so because of that, there is, at the moment, in the state of flux world, there are people who are progressing enormously into, you know, this wonderful thing that could happen in the future. But of course there's still generations living that have experienced and lived with all of this historical bias and all this historical, you know, mentality, who are still around, they're living, they're in the world, and no matter how much they develop, there are still, you know, there's going to be some level of misinformation and growing that needs to happen in the next couple of 10 years, 20 years, in order for everyone to accept that. And I think it's going to take a long time for everyone to become accepting human beings. And even if there are, you know, there is that level of, you know, children will always find something to bully someone else about. And gender identity particularly is a very difficult subject, because it is so ingrained in culture. It is so very ingrained in culture, right down to the language, where you have he, she, instead of, in the English language we don't have a gender neutral pronoun really, apart from they, them, their, which is all plural, so you can't have a single gender neutral pronoun, which is a really sad state to be in, because you can't express who you are if you are not within that set binary system. And so because of that, it's so deeply ingrained in culture. And there is a lot of flexibility that's coming in, like, you know, from the late 20th century, you know, women wearing trousers, women doing things that men would traditionally do, and that is a huge progression. And, you know, in the last 100 years, the progression that's been made by the human race in general is phenomenal. I think in 10-20 years it's going to be really exciting what we see in the world. My rule of thumb is, if it's not hurting anyone else, then it's a private conversation. Your sexuality, your gender, and your physical sex is a private conversation between you and whomever you choose to share it with. But it does take incredibly brave individuals on a public level to express what's going on in their lives in order to make change happen. And, you know, there's things like, you know, changing your physical sex, changing your gender identity in terms of whom you see yourself without physically changing your sex. Or, for example, Angelina Jolie hasn't changed her physical sex, but if you were to look at her from a physical sex point of view, you know, what makes the identifiers of a female, she no longer has for health reasons. Does that make her any less of a woman? Absolutely not. But because she doesn't have those physical sexual organs in terms of her reproductive system because of health, does that make her any less of a woman? Of course it doesn't, but it's something to consider in terms of this modern world where there is flexibility. There is no real binaries. There is yin and yang is a really interesting concept. Yin and yang, sometimes you have the yin and yang without the two dots. I feel like you've got to have the two dots because it's the male and the female, and the male and female aspects of each gender. And it's a really very interesting subject, and I'm really, really excited to see how the world progresses in the next couple of years in terms of accepting how every individual is an individual, and meaning that the more people who make themselves public means that more people can make themselves public in a private setting, if that makes any sense. More people on an individual level can learn to love themselves for their differences, and learn to respect themselves and respect others for their differences, and that's incredibly exciting. Anyway, I feel like I've rambled on for quite long enough. I've got to go take this, you know, he started to move around again. Take this little guy back outside and make sure he finds a nice tree or something. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys all next week for another Naked Truth. Feel free to comment down below. Please feel free to voice your opinions. Any opinions are welcome, but please do it in a civil, understanding way. Everyone has different views on this matter. It's a very complicated matter, and as I said, particularly with gender identity, it's so ingrained in culture. It feels very uncomfortable to discuss, and so if you are going to do comments and comment down below, please do it respectively, do it honestly, and yeah, there we go. Thank you, Trisha, for broaching this subject. Well, obviously you didn't broach the subject, it's been on the internet, but thank you for bringing it up as a Naked Truth. More discussion is always good discussion, and I will see you guys all next week for another Naked Truth and all of that malarkey. I swear I've done the intro like 3 times. Anyway, thank you for watching. Bye guys.